Episode 235, Fact or Fiction. Can you tell when I'm telling the truth? We'll find out. Once again, my name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. Here we go. Fact or Fiction. One of my favorite episodes. I love these. This one is number 19. In this more than 4.5 year run that this show has been on, I love doing Fact or Fiction. It gives me an opportunity to really open up my creative juices, because the things that are fiction, boy, sometimes it takes me 2 minutes to think of something. Other times it takes me about a month to come up with an idea. But either way, I got them. Only a little downside, I've said it a couple times with Fact or Fiction, is some of the fiction things, like I said, are time consuming, or they could just pop in my head. But the facts, those are the ones that stretch me to my core. How so? I'm just telling you something that really happened to me. Well, the answer is simply, if I use those facts, I do my very best to not put them in story episodes, even though some of the facts that come up in Fact or Fiction would make excellent story episodes. But I only give you a little taste of them. So I don't know. I might just actually soften on my stance for that, because truthfully, some of the things that are factual here would really make pretty good episodes of story. I mean, I could go into great detail on some of these, whereas I just go into very short little spurts and tell you the pertinent information of the thing that was actually true. Who knows? I might actually consider that, because I think that some of these facts from the past, I mean, I had 19 episodes of Fact or Fiction. I have 6 stories or statements in each one. And amongst them, I have a lot of truths in there. A lot of things that I've actually done or seen that would make it very interesting stories. And just maybe I might go ahead and do that. We'll see. After year 5 comes along, maybe even before it, I'll have to. There's time. There's time. Who knows whether I'm going to change my mind on that or not. Chances are it would be for the best if I did, because, like I said, some of these stories that are fact, man, some of them are really stranger than fiction, as people have said from time to time. But let's not digress. Let's go directly into fill in the blanks. The question for the fill in the blank this week is going to be, well, what do I think is the worst part of mid-fall? Because here I am sitting here talking to you, recording this episode on November 18th, 2025. And of course, early fall is that end of September, October area where it's still, you're going to see 60s and 70 degree temperatures. So you've already got my answer right there. The problem with mid-fall is the fact that we fall off the cliff. It's very much possible that temperature-wise we fall off the cliff. And today is one of those days that we absolutely fell off the cliff. I mean, a couple days ago, in fact, the night before, it was in the 50s. And this morning I got up 5:15 to go run my mom to dialysis and go to the gym, and it was 37 degrees. No thank you. 37 degrees, no thank you. Of course, in that process, all my joints started hurting, because that's what they do when the temperature changes like that. It's just horrible. Old man stuff, you know. But truthfully, that's the answer. That's the blank space is filled in with that temperature drop what is the worst part of middle fall? The question and the fill in the blank is, well, it's that dropping of the temperature. Oof, can't stand it. Can't stand it. Well, now that we've done that, it's time to ring the bell and start the main event. Fact or fiction? Here we go. I love this part. Get ready for it. For those of you who have never heard a fact or fiction episode, I need to explain it. And hopefully you like it and go back on the archives on Spotify and even here on YouTube and check out the other ones. But what's going to happen is I'm going to state a fact or tell a story. And at the end of that, I'm going to ask you whether or not you think it's a fact or it's fiction. Now, I'm going to give you some time after I've finished all the statements and or stories to sort of decide whether or not you can figure it out. Of course, the pause button helps as well. But I give you a few seconds. Then, I tell you which ones were fact and which ones were fiction. And to let you know, I do have an episode in the past where I was very generous and I gave you all facts. And then I also had an episode where I was a little bit of a trickster and every single one was fiction. But for the most part, I mix it up pretty good. Sometimes it's right down the middle. Sometimes it's heavy in one side or the other. But usually it's gonna be a mix. But that's how it works. And we're gonna begin with the very first one. Of course, just like everything, because a combination of, like I said, every once in a while you kind of forget stuff, especially when you start getting old and had a bunch of concussions. You know how that thing works. I write everything down just to make sure I have all the stuff that I want to talk to set up. So I'm going to start with the very first one. Here it comes. I was, I guess, in my middle 20s. Early to middle 20s. Back in the day when every video game you bought, you needed to actually have the hard copy, either the disc or at the very, very, very end of the cartridge wars, with I believe it was Nintendo 64. Great system. But this is now in the era where I started buying, when I had PlayStation 2, which I hate, of course, everybody knows that by now, and the original Xbox. During those times, I bought a lot of games, and I bought a lot of bad ones. But I still bought a lot of games. And for the most part, back then, I used cash almost exclusively, because I would always keep a few $100s in cash with me. And of course, I would have, at the time, you had the checking account with the debit cards. They were all still there. I know. It's not so far ancient history, but using cash for a purchase these days that's more than $50 is a little bit unusual sometimes, people would say, right? A lot of times it kind of is nowadays. But back then, I was using cash to buy video games. And it turns out I went to, here's a blast from the past, a store not called GameStop, but one of the stores that GameStop used as its affiliate. It was another GameStop-like store. It was called Babbage's, another video game store. And there's another store that they had too. The name, I can't think of what the name is off the top of my head, but I went to Babbage's specifically for this incident. I go in and I found a game that I wanted, and it was like $45. It was what was the game? What was it? It was one of the bad games that I bought. That's why I can't remember the name of it. Because, like I said, I bought a lot of bad games, a lot of them, and this was one of them. And only thing I can remember was for Xbox. I go in, hand the guy the $45 that he wanted. He told me the game was going to be $45. I had two $50 bills in my wallet, and I had a $100 bill. So I gave him the 100. Why did I give him the 100? One little change. It only makes sense. I had two 50s, and I have a hard time breaking $50 bills to this day. And I had 100, and I figured maybe I get another 50, and mentally I knew that if I had a 50, I liked $50 bills. Still do. So if I get a 50, I'm less likely to spend that than I am to spend 100 of all things, because just like the bill. And so $45 for the game, I hand him a $100 bill. Wouldn't you know that this guy actually had a couple of 50s in his drawer. And I asked him, hey, can I get a 50 instead of 10s, 20s, something like that? Can I get 50? Because I wanted to keep the 50 as solid bill. I was like, all right, no problem. Hands you the $55. And it wasn't really 55. It was like 53, 54 because there was some change involved. And he handed it to me. Got my 50, got my couple singles because it was like 55 or 54 and change at the end as far as what he gave back to me. I just stick it in my pocket and I walk out the door. Take this terrible game, which was a really bad game. Really was. Wasted my $45. I get home and I crack open the game, start playing it, and that's when I realized how horrible it was. And at this point, I'm just like nauseated because of how stupid it is. And I go and I get my receipt, try to just think about taking it right back. Even though I know that I'm not going to get my 45 back, I'm going to get less or store credit so I can get another garbage game. Or maybe I'll hit a home run. You never know. But when I'm going through the receipt where I had my change in my pocket, I pull out the money that I had, and it turns out that he didn't just give me the 54 and the change. There was a $50 bill stuck to another $50 bill. So when he handed me the one, I got two of them. So he actually gave me an extra $50. And I was like, ooh, that ain't good. Now, at the time, I was working at Wawa, and I understood that money sticks sometimes. And if you lose that much money, that's going to raise a few eyebrows. And I know that for sure at Wawa it would. And I'm thinking he probably had the same issue. And so I said to myself, I'm going to do the right thing, and I'm going to go back to Babbage's and I'm going to give them the money. At this point, it would have been like an hour and a half. It took me another 20 minutes to get there. So we're talking like 2 hours later, I'm going back to the store. And when I do, fortunately, the guy is still there. It was a point in the day where he wasn't going to go home yet. He was still there. And I go up to him and say, hey, remember me from earlier? I bought that really bad game. I'm just calling it a bad game because it stunk. He goes, well, you want your money back, or do you want a store credit? I told him neither. I'm going to keep the game. But it's not about the game. It turns out that when you were giving me my change, two 50s got stuck together. And I want to give you the 50 back so you don't lose anything. And he goes, really? I give you an extra 50? And then he sort of looked really funny. And he said, well, it turned out that a guy, an hour after I had left, had showed up and actually bought something and had $100 bill for it, and he handed it to the guy at the register. And when he put it in the register, he went over there and it was good. And then he needed to get change after the guy left, so he was going to take 100 and he was going to go get himself some coin. Wouldn't you know, the guy that had given him that $100 bill for whatever he bought had a $100 bill stuck together, and he actually had an additional 100 in his drawer, so he had 50 extra because he gave me that 50 he didn't know about, but the other guy gave him a whole 100, and dude was gone. He told me, don't worry about it. Keep it. Once he said that, I said, wow, that's crazy. So I'm going to go, went to Burger King, bought some lunch for us, and we sat in the Babbage's and we ate. Essentially on that other guy. Do you think that I ended up going to Babbage's, getting a really bad game? Well, that part can obviously be true because there were so many bad games at the time. But getting an extra $50 and then spending it on a meal with the employee who luckily got an extra $100, or maybe, just maybe, something doesn't quite smell right. Next, wrestling fans are just different. Even here in Philadelphia, the same people who will gouge your eyes out at an Eagles game, throw a drink on you at a Phillies game, or I should say steal a ball from you at a Phillies game, throw a drink from you at a Flyers or a Sixers game, are completely different human beings when it comes to wrestling and WWE. These are totally different people. They trust you, you trust them. It's like it's a totally different universe. And I can certainly tell you that's the case because during my WrestleMania 40 weekend, I had some very interesting situations happen. And probably the most interesting situation was when I went to my first ever SmackDown. Now, granted, I had decent spot, man. I had floor seats because I had bought everything else, the WrestleMania 40 tickets for night 1 and 2 and Monday Night Raw. I had bought those well in advance. But the SmackDown tickets, I bought them literally the Wednesday before SmackDown. And they were at deep discount. I mean, I am slightly ashamed to say that my Monday Night Raw ticket cost 3 times as much as my SmackDown ticket. And granted, my Monday Night Raw ticket was above the entrance ramp. My SmackDown ticket was on the floor. And I was on the floor for SmackDown. But while there, it turns out that a gentleman and his lady friend, I don't know if it was wife, girlfriend, I don't know who it was, were sitting in front of me, and they had to go get some food from the concession stand or the bathroom. I'm not sure exactly which one. I can't remember. But the guy had a blue Universal Championship belt. He looked back at me and he said, "Hey, would you do me a favor and just watch my belt?" And I told him, "Sure, I'll do it." Now, realistically, this guy didn't know me from a can of paint. He had no idea that I was obsessed with belts. And I would do anything if somebody would be good enough to watch my belt if I needed it. And I had literally just purchased a U.S. Championship belt that morning, which was the third belt that I've gotten. And I think that was pretty cool that somebody would trust me enough to watch their Universal Championship belt, which I know if he had bought it that night would have cost him a lot. Quite literally, the U.S. belt when I bought it was pretty expensive. It was more than it would have been had I bought it even a year earlier. And then even the other belts that I had gotten were more expensive than they were if I had bought them a year earlier. So it's safe to say that the one that he would ask me to watch was somewhere between, and I don't exaggerate the price, it was somewhere between $400 and $600. Because that's what I had paid. I paid $450 for my U.S. belt. So I knew that Universal belt was somewhere in that range. And he just said, okay, I'm going to trust you, wrestling fan, to just watch my belt while I go away. Now, typically people don't usually let $500 items just sit there by themselves. Now, granted, I understood, but he didn't know that. As far as he knew, I could have been like, whoa, Universal Championship belt. Take that sucker and run. Forget the rest of the show. But I didn't. I sat patiently, made sure that nobody came near it, and admittedly, this is how I know that wrestling fans are different, because while I was watching the belt, I saw two other people looking at it, and they just kept on going. Had no ill intentions, had no desire to take that belt that was just sitting there. And it wasn't like the belt was in a seat that somebody was next to it. No. We were on the end of the aisle. And the guy who left the belt left it at the end of the aisle. So anybody walking up the aisle could have just grabbed it. And like I said, a couple of people looked at it and then just kept on going. Again, I say wrestling fans are different. Now, do you believe that somebody entrusted me to watch their $400 to $600 Universal Championship belt in the middle of what was the Wachovia Center at the time, or Wells Fargo Center, and now Xfinity Center, amongst 15,000 people, that person's going to trust me to make sure that nothing happened to his belt? Or do you think that that's a wishful thinking? I'll tell you at the end. This one was fun. Several years ago, I believe it was 2013. Yeah, 2013. I was coming back from work. I was going home. And I was working at Pep Boys at the time, off of Delaware Avenue here in Pennsylvania. Now, that Pep Boys has a couple distinct features that make it interesting, I think. For one, it's right off of 95, and above where the Pep Boys and the plaza where Pep Boys is at is actually Route 95, and there's like a sort of a underpass of 95, and people park underneath there all the time, and that's what it is. But it turns out that this day, when I was on my way home, I drove back under the underpass, which I like to do because it was an easier access for me to turn around and get back home. I could drive easily. It made it easier for me to get to where I wanted to go off of Delaware Avenue if I went behind the underpass. I go behind the underpass and I hear something. And I wasn't sure what it was. Now, typically, there could be some seedy activity going on under that underpass. It's dark. There's homeless people that sometimes move around there. There's all kinds of stuff that can be going on. And as I'm driving up, there's this broken down, sort of like where a building had fallen down or they knocked down most of it, and there was some of it left. And I pass this thing every day as I'm going home from that back area. But this night, it just so happens that I looked to my right and I saw what appeared to be sort of a camera. And on my left, there was a whole rock band actually recording a video. I think it was a really good location. And they were really smart and really cool when they did it. It's the first time I ever seen anything like that. Now, I'm not going to say that this was a major production. I think it might have been a garage band that was just trying to put something out there. I thought that was pretty cool. Now, my question for you is, did I actually see a couple of rockers actually making a video? Or should you just fast forward that story? Next one. I sold an old lady with a walker coming out of the grocery store. It was Giant specifically. And she was with another lady who was probably within a few years of her. They're both relatively older women. And they were walking out. One, like I said, was a little walker, and the other one was just pushing the cart. And I don't know what it was. There must have been some uneven part in the pavement. But the lady with the walker lurched forward and she fell forward. And when she fell forward, needlessly, she hit the ground. Now, her friend who was pushing the cart went a few more steps, then recognized that her friend had fallen down, turned around, and didn't really panic. She kind of kneeled down, and then she sort of helped her up, dusted her off, and then started laughing. And then the lady who had the walker started laughing as well because she was like, oh, I can't believe it. I fell. And they had a good laugh. And I'm looking at this, I'm thinking to myself, these two older ladies just literally, one fell down, the other one helped the other one up, and they're laughing about the entire incident. All I could think of is, man, I hope that I could be like that one day. Take a fall with my old butt and be like, I'm good. Let me just get up, keep on going, dust myself off. Just like I used to tell the kids sometimes when they were really little. And they would be walking and they'd fall down. I'd say, oh, you fell down. Don't cry. Get up, dust yourself off, and keep going. And that's exactly what that older lady did. Truly toughness personified. Now, do you think I actually witnessed an old lady with a walker fall down and her friend respond in such a way where it was like, get up, you're tougher than that? Or is that just a figment of my imagination? Here comes one. I actually bought a lot of eggs this day. Like, it was a weird situation. I went and got an 18 pack and a 24 pack of eggs. from Walmart. When I went to go do this, I was at the register and they rang them up and I was ready to go. But the cashier put the eggs in a bag, and the handle broke off of the bag. Not completely off, but it just separated from the bottom part of the bag. And she just tied it off, no big deal. And I was watching it, so I saw it, and I knew that the bag was tied off. And I'm like, all right, just be mindful. The bag has a ripped handle. Of course, with my infinite wisdom, I drove home. Everything cool. I get home. I'm bringing in everything in the house. And now it's time for the eggs. What's the first thing I do once I walk in the house and I put the eggs down on the table and I'm getting ready to put some stuff away? I then decide to put the eggs away. Was totally cautious and mindful of the fact that the handle was ripped up until that moment. I grabbed the eggs by the broken handle and the eggs fell on the ground. Now I have in my house, it's on a slab of concrete, and the kitchen has tile, so it's hard floor. I wouldn't want to fall down on. Nonetheless, an 18 pack and a 24 pack of eggs. And what made matters better is I had the 18 pack of eggs on the bottom and the 24 was above it. So the heavier amount of eggs was on top. So when it fell down, the heavier eggs landed on the smaller container eggs. And of course, the 18 pack of eggs was all but lost. I had 3 eggs from the 18 pack that survived, which amazed me that 3 of them actually did survive, but 3 did. I literally lost 15 eggs out of that container. It was crazy. 15 of 18 were gone. I'm just glad that the 24 pack was on top, so that at least the more eggs were there. I was able to keep 3 from the 18. I had to throw away 15 eggs. The question that I ask you is, do you think that I was that absent-minded for just that little bit of time and lost 15 eggs? Or is there just really egg on my face for coming up with a story like that? I'll let you know in a minute. Finally, the last story that I've got for you right now. It's my senior year of high school. August 1995. I'm a class of 96. I was talked into playing football my senior year. But, of course, I didn't let the coach know that he didn't really have to talk me in too much, because I had sort of a mental vision of kind of what I wanted for my senior year back in my sophomore year. And I was going to accomplish this, and I was fortunately able to do so. What did I want? I wanted my varsity jacket to be track, which I'd never seen a track varsity jacket. So lots of wrestling, lots of football, lots of basketball, lots of baseball, lots of soccer. I even saw a bunch of cheerleading varsity jackets, but I never once saw a track varsity jacket. And so when I got my letter in my sophomore year, that's the very first thing I did, is I got my track varsity jacket. Now, the other 2 things that I wanted was my class ring. I wanted to have a wrestler on the inside of my class ring, which I did, because as a wrestling fan, it just made sense to have a wrestling ring. They call it the squared circle. However, I wanted to actually make it a circle. The wrestler was in underneath my ring, in my class ring. And the third and final thing I wanted was something that I had seen plenty of other track guys do who were at the end of their high school careers. They had, instead of just a warm-up track suit, they wore their football jersey as their warm-up for track. And let me tell you, that's exactly what I did. I took my number 59 and I wore it proudly as my warm-up for track. Now, in order to get that, you had to be a senior and you had to be on a team. So that was part of my motivation. Probably, sadly, 60% of my motivation was I wanted that jersey. And so I played. Now, the interesting thing that happened was when I finally officially declared that I was going to play, it was over the summer. I told the coach, I'll go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and play. And I didn't buy cleats. I didn't have any cleats because I didn't play in my junior year. My feet had gotten a lot bigger from my sophomore year. So I needed new cleats. And the first practice came about. I didn't have any cleats, just had sneakers. And so I just said, well, I'll just go ahead and see what I can do with these sneakers. Now, there were kids who were there who had their cleats and everything. They were ready to play, but because they had no intention on not playing football. They knew they were going to play. Whereas me, I had really was undecided up until, like I said, up until the August, right before the practices were starting. I was undecided. Kind of. So, what did I do? I went out there in the non-pad practices and then the practice with pads, and here I go. I don't have any cleats on, but I'm still out there. And I played defensive tackle. And there was guys who were taller and even heavier than I was. I was only 255, and these guys were like 270, 280 with cleats. And they were in the gym a little bit harder, thinking about football, whereas I was just focused on track, and I took the summer off really from any real weightlifting. I didn't really do any weightlifting at all. But I had one of the best practices I had ever had without cleats on as defensive tackle because of my balance, my flexibility, and my just pass rush moves and run block moves. I was able to just throw people aside without cleats on. And the coaches were overjoyed with my performance. I was tossing people around. I didn't lose my grip or my footing without cleats. Without cleats, just playing in sneakers in the grass. And I was still throwing people to the side, getting back behind the line of scrimmage, as they like to say, playing behind the line of scrimmage as a defensive tackle. But I was playing behind the line of scrimmage as a defensive tackle without any cleats on. Unfortunately, when I did get cleats, I did end up tearing my, what was it? Medial meniscus for a second time, and that was the end of my football career. But I had those practices where I beat people down without cleats on, and I always think of those fondly. What could have been? What could have been? Now the question is, for you, was that ever actually a thing that happened? Did I actually throw people around without wearing cleats in my senior year at practice? Or should you just let that whole story slide? Well, that's all that I've got for you right now. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of time to think about it. And I'm going to tell you what was what in about 15 seconds. All right. You had a little bit of time. If you wanted more, you could have paused it. But now it's time for me to tell you what was what. What was fact, what was fiction. I'm going to start off with the first one. Go to a Babbage's video game store, paid some money, got an extra $50 from the register from the employee who didn't realize that two 50s had stuck together. Go back to the store 2 hours later, and he told me to keep the money because somebody had given him an extra 100. Is that a fact or is it fiction? Well, as much of a cash handler as I was, even at that point in time, in the early 2000s, I know for sure that occasionally a bill may have slipped past here or there. But I was pretty good at making sure that it didn't. And at the time, wow, we didn't have any cards. We didn't accept cards. So you had to be extra on top of it. Now, the guy at Babbage's, he would have accepted cards because they did. However, didn't happen. Nope, did not happen. Would have liked to have had an extra $50, but I didn't get it that day, that's for sure. First one, fiction, without a doubt. The next one. On my 4-day weekend for WrestleMania 40, when I went to SmackDown for the first time, a guy left his Universal Championship belt in my presence to watch over it while he went away. I don't remember if you remember, but I absolutely told this story a couple of times. And in fact, I don't know if I mentioned it in my WrestleMania show, which would have been WrestleMania Night 1. It's on Spotify if you want to check that out. I would suggest listening to both parts. It actually is me sort of documenting my entire WrestleMania weekend. It was a lot of fun. But truthfully, that did happen. A guy chose me, who was sitting right in front of where he was on the floor at the now Infinity Center, whatever they call it now, for SmackDown. And he asked me, hey, would you just watch my belt for me for a little bit? And I said, sure. And again, like I said, wrestling fans are different because, I mean, really, most of the time, I would imagine that nobody would even ask a question like that. Not only did he ask it, but he trusted that his belt was going to be there when he got back. And again, like I said, when I was watching it, there was a couple people who looked at it, and like I said, it was in the end of the aisle. Somebody could have just picked it right up, walked right off with it. But of course, I wouldn't have let it because I told them I wouldn't. So in truth, yeah, somebody did entrust me to babysit their Universal Championship belt. That was kind of cool. I got a close look at it because when I went and get my U.S. Championship belt, I had essentially created a tournament to decide which belt I wanted to get. And there were 4 belts that were in my mind. I knew I was going to get one belt that WrestleMania weekend. And the belts that were in my tournament were the red Universal Championship belt, the older U.S. Championship belt with the flag shape, the U.S. Championship belt that I in fact did buy, the real thick plate, the one that's active right now, and of course the other finalist that I had was in fact the Universal Championship belt, the blue one, because it was the uh, the last one that not the last one. It was the first person who was awarded that Blue Universal Championship was Bray Wyatt, and I kind of wanted it because of that. But I didn't take it. I didn't buy it. I got the U.S. title, and I'm glad. I think I like my U.S. belt a lot. But truthfully, yeah, somebody had me babysit. That is a fact, an absolute fact. Next, I was driving home from Pep Boys, and I saw a rock band recording a video. This too is a fact. It was actually pretty cool. I was driving by there, man. I go there all the time, and it's just usually dark and nothing going on. But then that day, there was, I think it was 1, 2, 3, 4. There was 4 guys, and they had all their equipment, a couple guitars, some drums set up, man. And like I said, there was a camera, and they were ready to go. They were probably shocked to see me drive by because they didn't expect anybody to be driving back there. They were just as shocked to see me as I was to see them. But yeah, it was pretty cool. I did in fact see those guys record a video underneath 95 behind the Pep Boys. To this day, I haven't gone to look for it, but I imagine it's out there somewhere on YouTube because it was 2013 when I saw it. So there's a real chance it's probably out there somewhere. Possible. Who knows? The next one. Old lady with a walker falls face first on the ground at Giant, and her friend stops the shopping cart that she had, tells her to get up, dust herself off, and keep going. Now, I would always tell my kids when they fell down when they were young and they were small and just trying to figure out how to walk. They fell down a lot. The kids do. And I would tell them, hey, get up. And I would physically tell them, stand up so you don't cry. Look at yourself. Dust yourself off. And I would tell them, just physically dust yourself off. And let's keep going. And they would do that. They'd stand up, they'd look around, they'd look at themselves, make sure they're okay. Then they'd dust themselves off and they'd keep going. Now, I know that there are definitely some tough elderly people who would do that, but truthfully, I just made that up. Fiction. Didn't happen. At least, not while I was watching. Next, I bought a lot of eggs. They were put into a bag with a broken handle, and I forgot that the handle was broken. Came home, grabbed it by the handle, and dropped the eggs on the floor. This is a fact, a very painful fact, a very, 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 very painful fact. I mean, an 18 pack and a 24 pack of eggs. What is that, 42 eggs? And I was like, all right, the kids are going to have eggs for a while. I got to think about it. And then I drop almost half of them. Yeah, that happened. Totally forgot that she tied off the handle of the bag, and it's Walmart bag. Their handles. Now, granted, I did an experiment with my son a couple years back with the darker gray bags when they started coming out with them. Now, these ones are a little bit lighter, so I think they're a different bag, different material. But the experiment was how much weight could you put in a bag before the bag broke? And I chose those because I looked at them and I knew there was something strong about them. And me and my son actually took 25-pound dumbbells and stuck them inside the bag and was able to pick up the bag. And at the time, the bags were able to hold 85 pounds of dumbbells inside the Walmart bag. 85 pounds, which pretty much means that anything you're going to put in a Walmart bag, it's going to be strong enough to hold. However, at 85 pounds, after having it stretched, putting each of these dumbbells inside the bag, the actual handle did rip on the bag. So that's where it was weak. It didn't fall through the bottom, but the actual handle ripped. The bottom of the bag and the integrity of the bag itself was still good, even with 85 pounds of dumbbells in it. And of course, knowing that that experiment had happened and knowing that the weakest part of the bag was, in fact, the handle, that's the part they gave, you would think that I would have been smart enough to pay a close attention to the fact that the bag had ripped at that point. But of course it didn't. And sure enough, splat. 15 eggs all over the floor. Now again, I said it before, if it was reversed, let's say the 18 pack was above the 24 pack, I'd have probably lost 20 eggs, 25 eggs, because the way that the thing had landed, the 24 pack just boom, was cushioned by the 18 pack. And if it had been the other way around, there wouldn't have been any cushion for the 24. I might have lost all 24 because they would have just all hit the ground. And that'd have been just an absolute mess. I wish that wasn't true, but unfortunately, it was, in fact, a fact. Finally, my senior year of high school, I decided to play football. In August practices, I didn't have any cleats yet, and I still had an impressive practice without cleats. So much so that the coaches were excited to see what I could do when the season really started. But of course, I hurt my knee and I never got to play varsity football, which is one of the saddest moments and regrets in my life. I wish I'd gotten to, but I never did. And that story is a fact. Without cleats, I was dominating. There's no other word to put it. There wasn't a person on the offensive line that we had who could stop me without cleats. What are you going to do if I actually have footing? Now, hindsight being 2020, maybe I should have played without cleats, because when I hurt myself, I was hitting the sled, the line sled, and of course, the cleats dug into the ground, and when I hit the sled, that's when I felt it, and I knew I'd done it again. Now, if I didn't have cleats on that day, maybe my foot wouldn't have dug into the ground, and maybe I wouldn't have torn my cartilage that time. Because of the cleats holding me down is probably what tore the cartilage. If I didn't have the cleats, I'd have slid a little bit more, and maybe I wouldn't have been able to, maybe I wouldn't have hurt myself that day. Maybe I would have had a senior year football season. Who knows? That was, well, 30 years ago. 30 years ago. It's crazy to say that, but it was 30 years ago. And that was a fact. And that's the end of Fact or Fiction. What I can tell you now is I'm going to ring the bell and end the main event. Crazy. Alright. Now it's time for the Spear of the Week. Now, the only person that could be used as the Spear of the Week, unfortunately, is somebody who, well, it depends on how you look at it. They deserve it. I think they deserve it. I'll let you be the judge of whether or not you think this person deserves the Spear of the Week. I mentioned that I'm going back to the gym slowly but surely, and my initial protocol was to do what I did when I was training to be a corrections officer, which was to do the treadmill for 4 straight months in order to get myself ready to go. But I changed my mind at the beginning of November, end of, rather, the end of October. I started thinking about it because my arm from the torn bicep, it just seemed like it was starting to get weaker. And because it had been a year since I had torn my bicep. And then I had that neck thing, which has really affected my shoulder. And my shoulder has just been weird for ever since. And that was March this year. And I made a decision at the end of October that I was going to start doing weights, of course, at a low level, very low level, because it was going to hopefully be able to strengthen both of my arms, because I need something. I have to do something about that. And so, totally not arms, which is funny, it was a leg day, and it was yesterday, November 17th, 2025. That's why I'm glad that I no longer go to Planet Fitness, because I am totally a lunk. The lunk alarm would go off the second I even drove up to the parking lot. I am gym bro mentality. I cannot handle certain things because when I go into the gym, I'm completely focused and I want to get done what I want to get done. I have a certain time frame. I want to make sure that my heart rate stays at a certain point, and I know that it'll do that if I go from one exercise to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and keep that nice focus and that keep rhythm going. And I want to be able to be in and out and do what I got to do and go. Turns out yesterday, I go to the gym, I do my treadmill thing to loosen up. Of course, my back always still hurts even after doing that. I don't even know why. But it is what it is, the hip too. But I had finished and I was about to do my very light leg routine, which consists of some calf raises, leg curls, and then leg extensions. Of course, leg extensions are for the quads. Leg curls are for the hamstrings, and calf raises are for calf raises. Now, I had already been on the treadmill for 20 minutes, and I did the arm bike for 5 minutes. And I knew that I had a chance to go and do the leg stuff, so I went and I just jumped at it and I attacked it. And upon doing that, I saw that there was somebody on the leg curls and there was a guy on the leg extensions for the quads. Guy leg curls finished, and I said, okay, then I'll go and I'll do my calf raises on the leg press. And I go and I start doing my calf raises. And while I'm doing my calf raises, I do one set. And now the guy who was over on the leg extensions, he just finished a single set of leg extensions. I then do 3 more sets of calf raises. Dude's still sitting on the leg extension. He's not doing anything. He's just sitting there. So I did 4 sets of calf raises, moved to the leg curls. Complete 4 sets of leg curls. Dude hasn't touched the leg extension this entire time, and I've literally done 8 sets. Now, the calf raises, I did sets of 20 to 20, or 25 to 30. 4 sets of 25 to 30 calf raises. The leg curls, I did 4 sets of 12 to 15. So I did a lot of reps and I did a lot of sets, and this dude hasn't done anything. He's been sitting there. And that's the next thing. And I'm waiting to the point where I'm about to do a 5th set of leg curls because I don't want my momentum to stop before he's finished. And just before I'm about to start that fifth set, dude gets off the leg extension. And I'm like, all right, good. I didn't do that fifth set because I don't know if I could have. And I was able to do my leg extensions and go home. So, without a doubt, dude was just sitting there, chilling out, relaxing, living life, watching the movie, only needed popcorn on the leg extensions. He's the guy who needs to be speared because, boy, there is nothing worse than taking up space and doing anything. There's something about being on a pot and getting off if you're not going to use it. Certainly would apply to this guy. But he, who sat on the leg extensions for what took me 8 sets of other work to do in the time that he had finished one, and he sat there from that point on looking at his phone, you're the Spear of the Week. Now, speaking of weeks, speaking of good weeks, whew, week 11 of the National Football League. I'm going to pat myself on the back. Can't get my arm back there, but you get the point. I had a very, very good week. Let's start off week 11. I said the Jets were going to win. We're going to lose to the Patriots 35-10. Ended up being 27-19 Patriots. I called Dolphins, of all things, winning 20-16. Now, my margin of victory was very close because what actually happened was 16-13, Dolphins had won. That's 2 for me. Bears over the Vikings. I said 18-21. A little closer, 19-17, but the Bears did win. Bills versus the Bucks. I like the Buffalo in a 35-28 sort of way. They won 45. They won 44-32. Bills won. That's 4 for me. And then the 49ers versus the Cardinals. I said 27-21. The 49ers said 41-22. That is another win. I went 5-0 in week 11. I got them all right. Now, my recap of week 12 is going to be Bills 30, Texans 14. I say Lions 38, Giants 10, Bears 35, Steelers 30, Raiders 17, Browns 7, 49ers in Monday Night Football 28-20 over the Panthers. And well, hey, Brock Purdy is back, so anything is possible now. Week 13, here we go. Prognosticating 2 weeks in advance. Going to week 13 now. I see the Lions 30-21 over the Packers. Cowboys get beat by the Chiefs 28-17. The Ravens win 24-10 against the Bengals. The Broncos are going to beat the Commanders 21-17. And I'm really putting this out there. 28-17, 49ers over the Browns. Let's see how many of these I get right. Now, it is time to shut the show down. We're doing pretty good. Let's start off by saying, hey, I need you all to subscribe who haven't to @PhilTheLip here on YouTube. Last couple weeks, been getting a few more subscribers. I love it. Let's see about getting a few more. Now, speaking of which, we also have people who have joined the Lip Facebook group. Join us. Join us. There's always room for one more. And right now, my last check, there was 95 people in the Facebook group, the Lip Facebook group. Let's see if we get it to 100 by the end of the year. That's all. See if we get to 100. Be an interesting little goal to get, right? Let's see if we can get 100 people to join our Lip group. And like I said, even after that, there's always room for one more every single time. Every time. I will say this. Mr. Patrick Houston of Houston's Hustle Hobbies and, of course, Zenith Transportation, he had a very interesting take on the month of November. And I certainly can say that I didn't jump on it soon enough, but I think next year I'm going to officially, I might take up some part of that challenge. He called it November, which is pretty cool. November. He is certainly doing certain things that he is going to say no to in November. And one of those things is he said that no shaving. And, well, you know, I actually considered shaving not that long ago, probably a week and a half ago. And then I started thinking about November. Like, you know what? Maybe that's what I'll do, at least for this year, in November. No shaving. So we're going to let this sucker go a little bit more, see what it looks like. Solidarity for November. But next year, like I said, I'm going to come up with a few things that I'm not going to do in November when the time comes. That'll be interesting. I guess what we're at now is the words of wisdom. Oh my goodness. I can't believe I forgot my placard. Give me just a second. Give me just a second. Give me just a second. Alright, I'm back. Typically, I usually have my words of wisdom already laminated and ready to go, but I didn't even actually laminate this one yet. It's just sort of sitting in a pouch. And it's one that I definitely want to use. Probably laminate them tomorrow. And the words of wisdom are: anyone can lead you somewhere. You need to choose if that place is where you want to be. One more time. Anyone can lead you somewhere. You need to choose if that place is somewhere you want to be. Gotta think about that, right? Anybody can lead you somewhere, but do you want to be where that person's leading you? That's definitely words of wisdom, for certain. But now, I believe all minds are clear, and as a result of that, all I've got left for you is, my name is Phil, and you just listened to The Lip.